You raised him with love, and he locked you up like an animal. That's the sentence that still rings in my head. It started with a door slamming. Not gently, not by accident, but the kind that makes your heart pound because you know someone wants you to feel shut out. Before I dive into it, please take a second to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I really want to know what part of the world this reaches. This story, it's not just mine anymore. It's a warning, a release, and maybe even a bit of justice. I'm a mother of one. Well, technically two, if you count my best friend Daisy. She's my dog, a big, sweet, golden retriever with honey-colored eyes that always understood more than most people I've met. After my husband died 5 years ago, my son Kyle moved in. Or rather, I invited him in. He said he needed a place to get back on his feet after his divorce. I said yes without hesitation. What mother wouldn't? For the first year, I didn't even notice the shift. You know how it is. You let one thing slide, then another. He took the master bedroom because it's closer to the bathroom. I moved into the guest room without a word. He stopped saying thank you when I cooked. Then he stopped eating with me at all. And then came the dog comments. Daisy sheds too much. Why is she allowed on the couch? Your mutt chewed my charger. Daisy never chewed anything. He just didn't like her, and she didn't like him. I used to joke, my dog has better instincts than I do, but I wasn't joking. The day it happened was a Tuesday. I remember because I always bake blueberry muffins on Tuesdays. It's silly, I know, but little routines keep me grounded. Kyle had been stomping around the house since morning. Something about his ex-wife posting photos with her new boyfriend. He was seething, slamming cabinet doors, muttering under his breath like I wasn't even there. I tried to lighten the mood. Want a muffin, sweetheart? I said, holding out a warm one on a little plate. He looked at it like I'd handed him poison. You never get it, do you, Mom? I don't want muffins. I want space. I blinked, unsure what to say. He didn't wait. I need the house to myself tonight. Michelle's coming over. Michelle, the new girl. She had never once acknowledged me when she passed through the hallway. I'll stay in my room, I offered gently. Not good enough, he snapped. She says it's weird, you being here, breathing down my neck. I let out a soft laugh, not mocking, just disbelieving. Kyle, I live here. And then his face changed. Something in him shut off. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he just said, then go outside, you and the dog. She likes being outdoors anyway. I stood there, apron on, fingers dusted in flour, wondering if I'd misheard him. You want me to go out? Where? He opened the back door. You can hang out in the kennel. It's clean. Just for an hour or two. Please, I don't want her thinking I still live with my mother. I should have said no. I should have screamed. But instead, I froze. Sometimes when the people we love hurt us, the body protects us by shutting down, like it refuses to believe what's happening. Daisy followed me out like always, her tail wagging, eyes wide. Kyle gestured toward the kennel with an expression that was almost smug. Just chill out there, it's temporary. And then the metal latch clicked. I didn't even realize what he'd done until I turned and tried the door, locked from the outside. He had bolted it. My son had just locked me inside the dog kennel. For a few seconds, I didn't react, just sat down slowly on the little dog bed inside. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had built that kennel myself 10 years ago with my late husband. It was big, spacious, covered from rain, filled with soft blankets and toys, a palace for Daisy, not a prison for me. But there I was. I heard music start from inside, something poppy, too loud. Then the unmistakable giggle of Michelle's voice. I wanted to bang on the bars, scream, do something, anything. But then I noticed something. Something that made the corners of my mouth twitch with the tiniest bit of satisfaction. Daisy wasn't in the kennel with me. She had darted back inside through the open back door before Kyle closed it. He forgotten her. And if there's one thing I know for certain, Daisy was more than a pet. She was family. And she remembered everything. In New Chapter, the moment Daisy shows Kyle exactly what loyalty looks like and why you don't cross the woman who raised her. I sat there in silence, my hands wrapped tightly around my knees, feeling the chill from the metal bars seep into my bones. But inside me, there was heat, the kind that slowly builds in your chest like steam under a tight lid. From where I sat in the kennel, I could see into the kitchen through the large window above the sink. Kyle had flipped on all the lights. He was setting wine glasses on the counter, shirt half buttoned, music still pulsing in the background like nothing had happened, like I didn't exist. He thought I'd sit here quietly like a forgotten coat rack. But he'd forgotten Daisy. You have to understand something about my dog. She's not just smart, she's deeply loyal. When my husband passed, Daisy would sleep beside me with her head on my chest as if guarding my heart. When I cried, she'd nudge tissues toward me with her nose. That dog had a soul. And right now, her soul was inside that house. I couldn't see her, but I knew she hadn't gone to lie quietly in a corner, not when she knew something was wrong. She'd seen the door close behind me. She'd heard the bolt lock. I leaned forward, squinting through the glass. I saw Michelle walk into the kitchen in high heels and some kind of satin wrap dress, twirling a strand of her hair like she was starring in a commercial. Kyle put his hand on her waist. She giggled. Then he leaned against the counter and casually opened a bottle of wine. As he reached for the corkscrew, Daisy entered the frame. At first, they ignored her. Kyle waved her off like a gnat. But Daisy stood her ground, right in the middle of their romantic kitchen setup, head high, tail stiff, ears alert. Michelle wrinkled her nose. Ugh, why is she staring at me? Kyle bent down and clapped his hands. Go outside. Daisy didn't move. She looked straight at Kyle, her entire body rigid. Her gaze was locked, focused. Michelle tried to shove past her, muttering something about dumb animals. That was a mistake. Daisy lunged, not to bite, not even to growl, but to block. She got between Michelle and the hallway, tail puffed up like a banner, barking sharp and deep. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years. Not the friendly someone's at the door bark, but a warning. Kyle jumped back. What the? Daisy! He moved toward her. She growled low. That's when I realized she wasn't just protecting me. She was stalling them. Every step they tried to take toward the hallway, Daisy cut them off like a well-trained sheepdog herding sheep. I sat there watching through the glass, mouth slightly open. She was keeping them in one room, away from the hallway, away from the back door, away from me. Michelle shrieked, "Get that thing away from me! What is wrong with her?" Kyle grabbed a dish rag and tried flapping it toward Daisy like she was a fly. Go outside. But Daisy didn't back down. She barked louder, 2 barks, sharp and piercing. That's when Kyle lost it. He yelled, "Stupid dog," and lunged toward her with the dish towel. And that was his second mistake. Daisy dodged, quick as lightning. She darted under the table, snatched his napkin bundle full of silverware, and tore off toward the living room. Silver clattered across the floor as she went. Michelle shrieked again. Kyle chased after her, shouting, slipping on a spoon, and disappeared from my view. I took a breath. My heart was thudding. I knew Daisy's patterns. She wasn't just acting out. She was trying to lead him away. And it worked. About 20 seconds later, the back door unlocked. I stared at it. Then, slowly, the door pushed open. And there she was, standing proud on the porch, tail wagging, eyes shining like she'd just rescued the Queen of England. Daisy had pushed it open with her nose. Kyle must have left it unlocked in the chaos, or maybe the latch hadn't clicked fully. I didn't care how it happened, just that it did. I stepped out of the kennel, trembling, more from adrenaline than fear. Daisy nuzzled my hand gently, whining low, as if to say, "I got you." I stroked her soft fur. "I know, baby," I whispered. "You did good. You did real good." I didn't go back inside right away. Instead, I walked slowly around the side of the house, still in my apron and garden shoes, and slipped in through the garage side door. Inside, chaos. Kyle was bent over, picking up scattered forks. Michelle was shouting something about being attacked. The wine was spilled, one of the chairs had toppled. They didn't even hear me come in. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Having a good evening?" I asked calmly. Kyle looked up. His face went white. "Mom?" Michelle gasped. How did you?" I raised an eyebrow. "You forgot the smartest creature in this house wasn't you." And then I looked down at Daisy, who was sitting at my side, chest puffed like a little soldier. I smiled. She remembered what loyalty means. Maybe you both should take notes. In New Chapter, my decision to finally reclaim what's mine, and how Daisy became the talk of the whole neighborhood. It's funny how quickly a moment can wake something up in you. One minute, I was sitting in a kennel, my dignity folded up and stuffed in my apron pocket. The next, I was standing in my kitchen, shoulders squared, watching my son stumble over his own excuses while my dog sat like the hero of the story. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt clear. Kyle sputtered. I didn't mean for it to go like that, Mom. It was just a joke, all right?" I stepped farther into the room. My feet made soft taps on the tile floor. My hands were steady. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "A joke? Locking your mother in a kennel while your girlfriend sips wine in the house?" Michelle tried to jump in. "Look, we didn't think you'd—" I held up a hand. "I wasn't speaking to you." Her mouth snapped shut like a purse. I turned back to Kyle. "Do you even hear yourself?" I asked. "Is this what you've become? A man who thinks humiliating the woman who raised him is funny?" His eyes flicked away. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said quietly. "I'm being honest." He tried to play it off, shifting blame like he always did. "I was under stress. You know I've had a hard time lately, with the divorce, and Michelle's been helping me feel normal again." I almost laughed. "You feel normal locking your own mother behind bars like a stray animal?" "I said I was sorry," he snapped. And there it was, his voice again, sharp, defensive, the same tone he used when I asked him to clean his room as a teenager, or when I caught him sneaking beers out of the fridge. But I wasn't backing down this time. "You didn't say sorry. You got caught," I said, folding my arms. "You thought you could shove me out of sight like an old sweater. But let me tell you something, Kyle. I'm not a sweater. I'm the reason this house even has a roof." Michelle scoffed. "Wow, bit dramatic, don't you think?" I turned to her, slow and steady. "Let me ask you something, sweetheart," I said, my voice low. If he's willing to lock up his own mother to impress you, what do you think he'll do to you when you're the one standing in his way?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I turned to Daisy and gently scratched behind her ears. She's the only one in this room who acted with any loyalty tonight. Then I turned and walked out. I went straight to the guest room, my room, the one with the little floral quilt I'd sewn myself and the wooden rocking chair where I used to read books when Kyle was a toddler. I sat down and stared at the wall for a long time, not crying, not trembling, just thinking. All these years, I'd been shrinking myself, making room for him, pretending that love meant always saying yes, that motherhood meant disappearing the second your child became an adult. But sitting in that kennel had stripped something away, and in its place, something else had settled in. Resolve. The next morning, I got up early. I made coffee, toasted an English muffin, fed Daisy. Kyle didn't come out of his room until almost noon. Michelle was gone. He walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You, want to talk?" I nodded. "Sure." He sat down across from me. I folded my hands. "Kyle, I think it's time we set some boundaries." He blinked. "Boundaries?" "You're a grown man. This is my house. I pay the bills. I buy the food. I built this life from scratch after your father passed, and I did it while grieving, working part-time at the library, and raising Daisy like she was my second child." He looked down. "I know." "No," I interrupted, "you don't. Because if you did, you'd never treat me the way you did last night. So here's how it's going to be." He looked up, his expression tightening. "You're kicking me out?" I paused. "No, I'm setting rules. You don't lock people in cages. You don't bring disrespectful guests into my house and expect me to vanish. You want to stay? Fine, then respect me." His jaw clenched. "I just feel like you think I'm a failure." That hit me in the chest, but I didn't let it soften me too much. "I think you're lost," I said, "but that doesn't give you the right to make me feel invisible." Silence stretched between us. The ticking of the clock was the only sound. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I didn't answer right away. I sipped my coffee. Finally, I said, "We'll see if you mean it." I thought that would be the end of it. But later that day, the phone rang. It was Cheryl, my neighbor. "You're not going to believe what I just saw," she said, barely suppressing a chuckle. "What is it?" I asked. "Your dog. She's out front. She just dragged your son's gym bag out the door and is sitting on it like it's her new throne." I opened the curtain, and there she was. Daisy, lying proudly on Kyle's gym bag, tail wagging like a banner of triumph. And I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. And that's how my neighbors began to take notice. And the quiet plan I started putting in motion to take back not just my space, but my peace. There's a moment in a woman's life when she realizes she doesn't owe anyone silence anymore. That moment came for me as I stood at my front window, coffee mug in hand, watching my golden retriever lounge like royalty on my son's gym bag. The irony was beautiful. Kyle had tried to erase me the night before. Now Daisy was making him the neighborhood spectacle. I didn't call her inside. She was doing just fine on her own. About 10 minutes later, Cheryl appeared on the sidewalk, walking her two little terriers, Pixie and Gus. She stopped in front of my yard, leaned on the fence, and called out, "Well now, that's a statement." I stepped out onto the porch. She earned that throne. Cheryl raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay over there?" I hesitated. I didn't want to spill it all, not yet, but I also wasn't going to lie anymore. "My son's been testing limits." She nodded. "I figured something was going on. You've looked tired lately, and I saw him yelling at Daisy last week in the driveway." I felt my cheeks flush, not with shame, but with a weird mix of embarrassment and relief. People noticed. I wasn't invisible. Cheryl came up the steps and lowered her voice. "Look, if you ever need help, you know where I am, right?" I smiled at her, a real, honest smile that warmed me more than my coffee. "Thank you," I said. "I might take you up on that." When she left, I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my little notebook. Not the grocery one, the other one. The one I'd used after my husband died to track the mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, the title documents. It was time to remember who owned what. And it wasn't Kyle. Later that day, I made a few quiet phone calls. First to my lawyer, Mr. Jacobs. He'd been a friend of my late husband's and handled the estate when Jerry passed. "Can we meet?" I asked. "Of course," he said. "Is everything all right?" "Let's just say I need to clarify a few things, especially about ownership." I hung up and took a long breath. Daisy patted over, laid her head in my lap, and let out a soft sigh, like she'd been waiting for this too. I scratched behind her ears. "Good girl," I whispered. "We're not going to be anyone's background furniture anymore." Kyle stayed in his room most of that afternoon. I didn't hear from him until dinner. He came out, shirt wrinkled, hair a mess, looking sheepish. "I ordered Chinese," he said, placing the bag on the counter. "Figured you might want some." I looked up from my book. "Thanks." He handed me a box of sweet and sour chicken. "Peace offering?" I nodded politely and took it. But something had shifted. He could feel it. I wasn't cold, but I wasn't soft anymore either. Over dinner, he tried small talk. "How's Cheryl?" "She's fine." "She say anything about me?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "She said Daisy looked regal sitting on your gym bag." He chuckled awkwardly. "Yeah, she's got personality." "She's got loyalty," I corrected. Silence. Then I asked him something bold. "Do you ever think about moving out?" His eyes widened. "What?" "You're 33, Kyle. You've been here 4 years. You have a full-time job. I just think maybe it's time you started building your own space, your own rules, without stepping on mine." He stared at me. "Are you kicking me out again?" "No," I said. "I'm suggesting you grow up." He stood up too fast. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "You make one mistake." I raised my voice for the first time. "No, you make repeated choices. Locking me in that kennel wasn't an accident, Kyle. It was a statement. And now I'm making mine." He froze. I looked him straight in the face. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. I pay the mortgage. I make the rules. If you want to stay here, you'll do so with respect. If not, you're free to leave any time." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He walked away. No yelling, no slamming doors. Just silence. And silence, this time, felt like power. That night, I took Daisy for a walk down our quiet street. The moon was out, casting soft shadows across the sidewalk. As we passed Cheryl's house, she waved from her porch swing. "You good?" she asked. "I think so," I answered. "I'm just done pretending I'm a guest in my own life." Cheryl smiled. "About time." Daisy barked once, softly, like she agreed. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was walking forward, not just surviving, but moving. In New Chapter, how the lawyers' meeting changed everything, and the surprise document that gave me more power than I ever realized. There's something oddly comforting about the smell of an old lawyer's office. The soft creak of leather chairs, the faint scent of paper and polish, the ticking of a wall clock. It reminded me of a time when things had weight, when words were written on real pages and promises meant something. Mr. Jacobs still had the same walnut desk and the same crooked little lamp I remembered from when Jerry and I signed the mortgage papers 27 years ago. And now I was back, this time alone. But not empty. He stood when I entered. "Eleanor, my goodness, you look strong." I smiled. That's new. Well, it suits you. We sat across from each other, and he adjusted his glasses with the same careful motion he'd used for decades. So, he said gently, tell me what's going on. I didn't cry. I didn't stumble through it. I told him the truth plainly, without dressing it up. My son has been living in my house for 4 years. I let him move in after his divorce, but lately he's been entitled, disrespectful, and a few nights ago he locked me in the backyard kennel like I was his burden to manage. Mr. Jacobs didn't blink. He did what? I nodded. It wasn't an accident. He wanted to hide me from a woman he was seeing. I'm not asking for legal revenge. I just want clarity. I want to know exactly what's mine and how I can protect it from him if things get worse. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick red folder. Well, he said, flipping through pages, you're not just the owner. You're the sole name on the deed. Your husband made sure of that before he passed. I leaned forward. What do you mean? He pulled out a yellow document and slid it across the desk. After Jerry's cancer diagnosis, he updated everything. He was very clear. He didn't want Kyle, or anyone, contesting your control of the property. You're the sole beneficiary, title holder, and trustee. It's not even shared. The house is yours, full stop. I blinked slowly. I knew we handled the paperwork, but I didn't know it was that absolute. It is. Jerry insisted on it, he said. He even left a letter for you, asked me to keep it sealed unless you ever came back needing clarification. He opened his cabinet, pulled out a slim white envelope with my name on it, written in Jerry's blocky handwriting. My hands trembled a little as I opened it. Inside, just a short note. Ellie, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I know our boy has a good heart somewhere in there, but he's never learned to carry his own weight. Please don't let anyone, even him, make you feel small in your own home. This house is yours. Always was. Love you forever. Jay. I pressed the letter to my chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like Jerry had just stepped into the room, put a hand on my shoulder, and reminded me, you're not crazy. You're not alone. Mr. Jacobs gave me space, then said quietly, would you like me to send Kyle a formal letter, something to establish boundaries legally? I shook my head. Not yet, but I want the documents ready, just in case. He nodded. Smart. I'll prepare a package. You can decide how to use it. I left the office with a folder tucked under my arm, a letter in my purse, and my shoulders 2 inches higher than they'd been in years. Daisy was waiting for me in the car, tail thumping the seat like a drum. We've got good news, I whispered, leaning in to kiss the top of her head. Turns out the house is still ours. She sneezed like she agreed. Back home, Kyle was in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone like it was just another Tuesday. You were out, he said without looking up. I almost texted to see if you needed anything. I placed the folder quietly on the table. No need. I was taking care of my future. He finally looked up. What's that? Just some paperwork, legal clarification. Nothing for you to worry about, unless you were planning on changing the locks again. He blinked. I never. Don't, I cut in. Don't lie. Not in my house. I turned and walked away, and he didn't follow. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. Daisy curled up at my feet, and the wind rustled through the trees. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was barely holding things together. I felt like I was rebuilding, and this time, I was using bricks of truth and steel beams of self-respect. In New Chapter, how Kyle's behavior begins to spiral when he senses he's losing control, and the moment he realizes he underestimated both me and Daisy. You can tell when a man starts to feel the ground shifting under him. He gets louder, jittery, starts checking locked doors twice. That's how Kyle acted for the next few days. He wasn't yelling, not yet. He was watching, peeking at my phone when I left it on the counter, asking who I was talking to on the porch, eyeing the folder on the bookshelf like it might bite him. He didn't know what was in it, but he knew it meant something. And for the first time, I didn't rush to reassure him. Let him stew. Daisy, on the other hand, was thriving. She followed me around the house like a gentle shadow. Every time Kyle walked into a room, she planted herself between us. Not aggressively, just present. She'd never done that before. But ever since that night in the kennel, it was like she'd appointed herself my silent bodyguard. Kyle noticed. "Can you get her off me?" he muttered one afternoon as I folded laundry at the dining table. "She's breathing down my neck like a warden." I looked up calmly. "She's just doing her job." He scoffed, but said nothing more. That Friday, Cheryl invited me over for coffee. I hadn't stepped into her house in months, partly from habit, partly because I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone want my company without needing anything in return. She had pumpkin scones on a plate and her usual chamomile tea. "I heard your boy's been awfully quiet this week," she said gently. I smiled. "He's been observing a power shift." "Oh, I love that," she said. "Power shift, like a slow-moving earthquake, subtle but permanent." I took a long sip of tea. That's exactly what it feels like. We talked about small things, recipes, Daisy's growing neighborhood fame, the sudden surge of fall leaves, until Cheryl leaned in and said something that stayed with me. "You know, men like Kyle, they don't lash out when they're in control. They lash out when they're losing it." I nodded slowly. "I know. So just be ready." I was. That evening, it finally happened. He cracked. I was sitting on the porch, my feet tucked under me, Daisy curled nearby, when the door flung open behind us. Kyle stood there, red-faced, holding a piece of mail. "This from your lawyer?" he snapped, waving an envelope. I didn't flinch. "Yes, and don't go through my mail again." "You're planning to throw me out, aren't you? Just admit it." I stood, smoothing my sweater. "I'm planning to protect what's mine. Whether that includes you depends on your choices." He let out a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable! After everything I've been through, you just abandon me?" That word, abandon, hit a nerve. I stepped closer, looked him square in the eye. "You were never abandoned, Kyle. You were rescued over and over again. You just never learned how to stand without leaning on someone else." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. His eyes flicked to Daisy, who had risen to her feet now, calm but firm. "Even the dog's against me," he muttered. "No," I said. "The dog just knows right." Later that night, I heard him on the phone in the kitchen. His voice was low but fast, anxious. Something about needing to figure things out, and "this isn't working like I thought." I didn't listen for details. I didn't care. Whatever storm he was brewing, I'd already weathered worse. The next morning, I got up early and sat on the edge of my bed with Daisy resting her head in my lap. I whispered, "We're almost there, girl. One more push. One more boundary." And then I opened my notebook again. This time, I wasn't just listing documents. I was drafting the outline of my future. And Kyle wasn't in it. The final straw that forced me to make a choice, and the night I turned the house back into a home on my terms. The house felt different that morning. Not just quieter, emptier. Like something had left it overnight, or maybe something had finally settled. I stood in the kitchen with my hands wrapped around a warm mug, looking out at the backyard. The kennel was still there, sitting like a monument to the worst kind of betrayal. But the air around it had changed. It no longer felt like a place where I lost something. It felt like the place where I woke up. Kyle hadn't come out of his room since the phone call the night before. I'd heard the creak of floorboards well past midnight and the soft thud of drawers opening and closing. Then silence. When I passed his door that morning on my way to let Daisy out, I saw something that made me stop. His duffel bag was packed, sitting at the end of the hall. Part of me felt relief, part of me disappointment that it might end this way, with bags at the door instead of healing at the table. But it didn't end there. At noon, he stormed into the kitchen with his jacket half on, phone to his ear, and a sour expression painted across his face. "You don't get to act like this is all your decision," he barked at me, slamming his coffee cup into the sink so hard I flinched. "I have rights too. I live here." I stayed calm. "You stay here. There's a difference." He glared at me, then back to whoever was on the other end of the phone. "Yeah, I'll be out by the weekend," he snapped. "Whatever." He hung up and turned to me. "That was Michelle's brother. Guess what? He's a realtor now. Says I can list the house and force you to split the proceeds. Said you're probably bluffing about that deed stuff." I raised an eyebrow. "So your next brilliant plan is to steal the house from under me with the help of your girlfriend's brother?" He crossed his arms. "I helped fix up this place. I painted that hallway. I repaired the garage door." I nodded slowly. "And I paid the mortgage for 27 years, bought the paint and the garage door with my paycheck after your father passed." Silence. Then, suddenly, he walked over to Daisy's food bowl and kicked it. The metal clanged against the floor, dry kibble scattering across the tiles. "Maybe if you didn't treat this dog like royalty, you'd have enough energy to treat me like a human being." Time stopped. Daisy stood frozen by the door, eyes wide. And I, without raising my voice, said the words that had been building in my chest for years. "Get out." Kyle blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Take your bag, take your jacket, take your entitlement, and get out of my house." His jaw clenched. "You can't." "I can, and I will. You can spend the rest of your life trying to convince people you were a victim of your own mother, or you can start acting like a man and fix what's broken inside you, but not in my house." He stared at me for a long second, and then, for the first time since he was a child, I saw something real flash across his face. Not rage, not defiance, fear. He picked up his duffel bag slowly, muttering something I didn't catch. At the door, he turned back one last time. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. I looked down at Daisy, who had stepped beside me and was now staring at him just as calmly as I was. "No," I said. "I already regret not doing it sooner." He left. Just like that. No goodbye, no slammed door, no apology. And I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, heart racing, hands trembling, not from fear, but from freedom. That afternoon, I called Mr. Jacobs. "I think it's time," I said. "Let's put something in writing. I want the deed officially recorded with a letter of occupancy restriction." He said, "Good call. Do you want a protective notice posted too?" I looked around the kitchen. At Daisy, curled up peacefully again. At the sunshine finally hitting the old tile floor. "Yes," I said. "Let's do it all. It's time this house remembered who it belongs to." A new chapter, how the neighborhood reacted, and the letter I left on the kennel door that made the whole block smile, and Kyle furious. There's something liberating about cleaning. Not the scrubbing and dusting kind, but the kind where you open every window, burn a little sage from a jar you forgot you had, and say out loud, "You are no longer welcome here." That's what I did the morning after Kyle left. I went from room to room, airing out the heaviness, the weight of resentment, the silence of held-in words. The kitchen felt brighter, the hallway felt wider. Even the old rug by the front door didn't creak as much when I stepped on it. And Daisy, she pranced, not walked, pranced. After lunch, I went out to the backyard. The kennel still sat there like a sore tooth in an otherwise peaceful mouth. I stood in front of it for a long while, staring at the latch, the same one my son had clicked shut without hesitation. I wasn't ready to tear it down, at least not yet, but I wanted it to mean something different now. So I walked back inside, grabbed a piece of thick paper from my drawer, and wrote, "This is the place where I realized I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. If you ever feel small, remember, cages don't hold you forever. Eleanor." I pinned it right to the gate, neat, centered, and firm. By the next morning, 3 neighbors had already seen it. Cheryl was the first to text, "Did you write that on the kennel? You absolute queen, huh?" Then came Linda, who jogs every morning past my house. I don't know what happened, but that message made me tear up, sending hugs. And by the afternoon, I noticed someone had quietly left a small bouquet of daisies at the base of the kennel. No note, no fanfare, just support. It wasn't just a message. It was a marker, a line in the sand, a declaration. I am not who you thought I was. I'm more. Daisy stayed close all day, clearly feeling the shift. Every time I passed the living room, she was watching the door, not with worry, but with vigilance, a quiet guardian. I spent the afternoon baking lemon loaf and sorting old photos. For the first time in years, I started organizing my memories. Not the ones that centered around Kyle, not the ones filtered through motherhood, but ones of me. Me and Jerry, me and Daisy at the lake, me and my books, my garden, my silly painted mugs from craft fairs. Pieces of myself I'd shelved in the name of being accommodating. At dusk, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Cheryl and 2 other ladies from the neighborhood, Linda and Marcia. They were carrying a plate of cookies, a potted plant, and a small sign that read, "Home belongs to the brave." I blinked. What is all this? Cheryl grinned. "Neighborhood committee, we voted. You're our inspiration of the month." Marcia added, "You have no idea how many women have been watching you and quietly cheering." Linda leaned in. "Some of us have sons too, Eleanor, and sometimes we needed someone to go first." I invited them in. We talked for hours about grown children who take too much and give too little, about husbands who pass too early, about finding our voices at an age when society tells us to shrink. We laughed, we cried a little, and when they left, the kitchen didn't feel like a place where I'd once been told to stay out of sight. It felt like mine again. The next morning, Kyle texted, just one line. "Did you really hang some dramatic quote on the kennel?" Cheryl posted it. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because I no longer felt the need to explain strength to someone who only recognized control. Instead, I walked outside, picked up the little bouquet of daisies, and placed it in a vase on my windowsill. Daisy barked once, soft, proud, and the sun poured in like a promise. In New Chapter, the moment Kyle tries to come back and finds that the locks and the woman behind them have changed forever. It happened 3 days after I put up the sign. A Saturday morning, crisp and golden. I was in the garden, clipping rosemary, when Daisy's ears perked up. She trotted to the gate, stood still, tail stiff, not wagging. I followed her line of sight, and there he was, Kyle, standing on the sidewalk like he didn't recognize the very house he'd lived in. Except this time, he wasn't walking up the steps like he owned the place. He was just standing there, looking unsure for the first time in years. He didn't have his usual swagger. No duffel bag, no smirk, just a cheap coffee cup in one hand and his other buried in his jacket pocket. I met him at the edge of the front yard. Daisy stayed at my side, unmoving. "Hey," he said. His voice was softer. "I figured we should talk." I nodded. "About?" He shifted. "I left some things in the garage. Tools, my old toolbox." I crossed my arms. "You mean the toolbox you said I'd never know how to use?" He winced. "Yeah, that one." I thought for a moment, then stepped back, unlatched the side gate, and nodded toward the driveway. "You can get them. I'll wait here." He walked slowly, too slowly. I could feel his eyes scanning the yard, the porch, the windows. When he came back, his arms were full, but his pride was empty. "Thanks," he said, standing awkwardly, toolbox at his feet. I nodded once. "I saw your sign," he added, "the one on the kennel." I met his eyes. "Good." He looked down. "I guess people think I'm a monster now." I shook my head. "No, Kyle. Monsters know what they are. You don't, and that's worse." He opened his mouth, closed it again, then glanced toward the house. "Can I come in for a minute? Just to, I don't know, sit?" It was quiet for a long time. I looked at Daisy, then back at him. "No," I said, not cruelly, just honestly. "Why not?" he asked, almost a whisper. "Because you've already had every chance to sit in this house with love and respect, and you chose control. You chose to treat me like background noise, like a burden." He shook his head. "I didn't mean to." "You locked me in a cage," I said flatly. "That wasn't an accident. That was a reflection of how little you valued me. And that door doesn't open for people who treat love like that." He nodded slowly. A part of him still wanted to argue, but the part that had always relied on guilt didn't work anymore. Not here. Not with me. I took a step forward and gently placed something in his hand. A small silver key. "What's this?" he asked. "The key to the shed. You can keep it. There's an old workbench in there. If you ever want to build something of your own, start there." He looked confused. "You're letting me take the shed?" "No," I said, smiling. "I'm giving you a chance, a real one, but it starts from scratch, and not in my house." He looked down at the key, then at me. For once, his eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I hope someday you'll understand why that's not enough," I said. And then I turned, walked back through the gate, closed it behind me, latched it, and left him standing on the sidewalk with nothing but a toolbox and a choice. That night, I changed the locks. Not just the physical ones, but the ones inside me. The ones that used to swing open every time someone said, "But he's your son." I still loved him, but now I loved me too. And that meant boundaries. That meant peace. That meant not needing permission to feel safe in my own skin. The kennel stayed in the yard. I added a fresh coat of white paint, planted daisies around its base. The sign stayed too. And every time I passed it, I smiled. Because now, when I looked at it, I didn't think of the night I was locked in. I thought of the moment I stepped out. In New Chapter, the letter Kyle sends weeks later, and how a quiet holiday morning brings the most unexpected gift back to my doorstep. The envelope arrived 3 weeks later. No return address. Just my name, Mom, written in a shaky, uneven hand I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the confident scribble from Kyle's high school permission slips. This one looked older, humbled. I stood at the kitchen counter, turning the envelope over in my hands. Daisy sat at my feet, watching me with her head tilted, like she sensed something unusual was about to happen. I opened it, slowly, like I was peeling open something I wasn't quite sure I wanted to see. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. No fancy stationery, just the lined kind you'd find in a drugstore notebook. Mom, I don't know how to write this, so I'm just going to try. I was angry, not just at you, at life, at my ex, at myself, at the fact that nothing turned out how I thought it would. And I took that out on you. I thought moving back home would help me start over, but instead, I slipped back into being someone I don't even like. I know locking you out was wrong. Saying it out loud makes me feel sick. It wasn't just a bad moment. It was cruel. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to write back. But I wanted you to know. I see it now. I see you. And I'm sorry I made you feel less than the woman who built that house and held everything together after Dad died. I've started going to therapy, not because someone told me to, because I need it. I'm working 2 jobs and renting a small apartment near downtown. Daisy probably still hates me. Honestly, she should. But maybe one day, when you're ready, we could sit on that porch again. If not, I understand. Love, Kyle. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it took me that long to realize I wasn't angry, not anymore. I wasn't ready to forget. I didn't even know if I was ready to forgive, but I was finally in a place where I could read those words and feel peace, not pain. That was new. That was mine. I didn't rush to respond. Instead, I folded the letter neatly and placed it inside the same folder that held Jerry's deed, the title documents, and the letter he'd written to me all those years ago. It felt right. One letter from the man who gave me this house, and one from the boy who once tried to take it. Both, in some strange way, had helped me remember who I was. The holidays came, quietly. I decorated the porch with white lights and a little tree in a pot. Cheryl brought over cinnamon bread. Linda knitted Daisy a red scarf with her name stitched into it. It was a different kind of Christmas. No big dinners, no forced family tension. Just me, my dog, and the knowledge that sometimes peace is earned, not given. Then, on Christmas morning, I found it. Right outside the front door, sitting under the little porch tree. No card, no name. Just a small box. Inside was a keychain. A silver circle engraved with the words, "Freedom doesn't come from the door, it comes from within." And hanging from it, Daisy's old tag, the one that had gone missing months ago. Tears welled in my eyes, not because I was sad, but because I finally felt seen without needing to be needed. I clipped the keychain to my house keys, locked the door, brewed some tea, and sat down with Daisy on the porch, watching the world breathe. Then, in new chapter, how I decided to rebuild the backyard space into something powerful, and the surprising new visitor who showed up with a plan I didn't expect. I was staring at the kennel again. It had been weeks since Kyle left, weeks since the letter, since the porch gift and the first quiet Christmas I'd had in years. But the kennel remained, whitewashed, framed by fresh daisies, a cage that no longer held a prisoner, just a story. And I kept asking myself the same question every morning when I sipped my tea by the window. What now? I didn't want to tear it down. That would feel like pretending it never happened. But I didn't want to leave it sitting there like a monument to something awful either. I wanted it to mean something, to become something. Daisy, of course, didn't care. She preferred the shady corner under the oak tree anyway. She barely looked at the kennel anymore, except when I walked near it. Then, like clockwork, she followed. Like she was still guarding it, or me. That's when Cheryl showed up with a pamphlet in her hand and an idea in her heart. "I know this is random," she said, stepping onto the porch without knocking, like only true friends can. "But you remember Marcia's niece, the one who works at the community center?" I nodded. "She's helping set up an animal therapy program for seniors at the assisted living complex on Maple Ridge. They're looking for volunteers to foster rescue dogs short-term. Safe spaces, fenced yards, calm people." She looked me square in the eye. "I told her about your yard, and your kennel, and your heart." I blinked. "You what?" She smiled. "You're not just a woman who stood up to her grown son. You're the woman who took back her peace. I thought maybe you'd want to help others do the same, even the furry kind." I sat there in stunned silence, then looked toward the backyard, toward the clean white panels, the daisies still dancing in the breeze. A place of safety, of shelter. I whispered, "It could be a sanctuary." Cheryl lit up. "Exactly, a second chance space for dogs who've been through hard things just like their people." By the following week, I'd signed up. They brought me a senior terrier named Biscuit, abandoned, nervous, graying around the muzzle like an old man with too many stories and not enough ears to listen. Daisy welcomed him with grace. She sniffed him once, then gave me a look that said, "I'll show him the ropes." And so began a new rhythm in my life. Walks with Daisy and Biscuit, morning coffee beside the kennel, now renamed the Gentle Pen on a little wooden sign I painted myself. Quiet evenings reading out loud to both of them from old paperback mysteries. Neighbors came by, not out of curiosity anymore, but support. One brought extra leashes, another donated bedding. A retired vet tech down the block offered nail trimming for free. My backyard had become a healing place. And somehow, so had I. Then one Thursday morning, just as I finished watering the flowers near the fence, a car pulled up. A small blue sedan I didn't recognize. A tall woman stepped out. Dark hair, mid-40s, serious face, but kind eyes. She approached slowly, carefully, as if not to startle anyone. "Are you Eleanor?" she asked. "I am," I said, setting down my watering can. She took a breath. "I'm Dr. Helen Marks. I've been working with your son in counseling." I froze. She continued gently. "He asked me not to come, but I came anyway, because I think you deserve to know. He's trying." I didn't say anything. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. Just surprised. She stepped closer. "He's not the same man who put you in that kennel. Not yet. But he's trying to unlearn who he became. And he talks about Daisy a lot. And you." Still, I stayed silent. She reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. "No pressure," she said. "Just a letter. No request, just reflection. You can read it, or not." I nodded. She smiled. "This yard, it feels peaceful." I looked around, at the light, the dogs, the sign. "It is." She left. I stood there for a long time, envelope in hand. I didn't open it. Not yet. I wasn't sure I needed to. What I did need, though, was exactly what I already had. A dog at my side, a porch to sit on, a past behind me, and a future I got to write one gentle, powerful day at a time. In final chapter, a quiet walk, a final decision, and the moment I realized the strongest walls aren't made of wood or locks, but love. The letter sat on the table for 4 days. I passed by it each morning, each evening. Sometimes I'd glance at it, sometimes I wouldn't. Daisy, in her quiet wisdom, never sniffed it, never pawed it. She just laid near it, like she knew what it was, and she was guarding my choice. On the fifth morning, I brewed my coffee, stepped onto the porch, and opened the envelope. Not because I was ready to forgive, not because I owed anyone closure, but because I was curious about the man my son might one day become. The letter was short, handwritten, and for the first time, not defensive, not dramatic. Mom, I don't need you to believe I've changed. I just want you to know I'm starting to believe I can. The therapist said something that stuck with me. People don't stay broken, they stay afraid. And I think I was afraid of becoming you. Strong, alone, unapologetic. Turns out, that's not weakness. That's what I want to be now. I miss the porch. I miss Daisy. But mostly, I miss being someone you were proud of. Kyle. I set the letter down beside my tea. And for the first time in a long time, I cried. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. Later that day, I took Daisy and Biscuit for a walk through the neighborhood. The trees were just beginning to blush with spring. Neighbors waved. Cheryl shouted from her garden, "How's the gentle pen doing?" "Better than ever," I called back. Biscuit trotted proudly in his new harness. Daisy kept pace, a little slower now, but steady, like always. We reached the park bench near the lake, Jerry's favorite spot. I sat down, unclipped the letter from my pocket, folded it one more time, and then, instead of keeping it or burning it, I placed it under a smooth rock by the water. Not hidden, not discarded, just returned to the earth. Because some things don't need answers. They need peace. As the breeze brushed my cheek, Daisy pressed her head into my lap, and I whispered, not to her, not to the wind, but to myself, "You are not broken. You are not caged. You are free." A car passed by in the distance, a bird called overhead, and my heart, finally, was quiet. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was no longer waiting for it to be. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If you've ever found the courage to reclaim your peace, tell me where you're watching from. This porch has room for you too.